Toyota, your lifetime warranty dealer, or online at gofiore.com.
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Weeknights at 6.
Granite Expressions, making a lasting impression. Good evening. This is Kaleidoscope, where we take a unique look at people, places, and things in our region. I'm Sarah Cameron. Have you ever heard of floating concrete? Well, you don't normally think of concrete blocks floating if you give them a toss into the water, right? Well, at the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown, this concept is not so far-fetched after all.
I have a lot of background in construction and things of that nature, but I went back to school for civil engineering when I was around 30, and I did actually get involved with the concrete canoe team out in Oklahoma State University when I was there in a very minor capacity. So it's kind of odd because when I came to interview here, they were actually building their canoe for that year on the dock, and I saw them and I said, hey, how you guys doing in your competition? And they had competed for many years but never won their regional competition. And I said, well, if you make a nice plan, in 4 years you could be at nationals if you incrementally improve every year. And then I got my position here, and 4 years later they went to nationals.
First thought was, are you sure that floats?
Well, the first time I'd ever seen one, I was actually still in high school. We were out at the Quemahoning Dam, and they gave us the opportunity to paddle some of the older boats that they weren't working on, and I was amazed by the fact that these concrete boats could float.
It's probably the standard reaction everyone else gets. Just like when I tell them there's a concrete canoe, it blows people's mind, and it blew mine, because you don't think of a cinder block floating on water, ever. That's the first thing that came to my mind was a cinder block, and it sinks like a rock, as it should.
And wow, this really works. And then when people say, oh, well, does a concrete sink? Or, and I'm like, no. And, and I explain to them, well, this, and they're like, wow, like, you actually do that. And I'm like, yeah, I do. I mean...
So I have a background in concrete, in steel, in design world, and I take a lot of that into the classroom and as an advisor to the club. I use a lot of my practical experience to help them, give them ideas and guidance on how to build a better canoe. People see a concrete canoe and they wonder, how does that float? And there's a lot of technology that goes into making concrete float, because you have to make really light concrete. The concrete canoe competition in some form has been national probably since the 70s. In the early days it was very rudimentary. You saw boxes, canoes shaped like bathtubs and things like that. And later on it became a formal national competition. Johnstown has competed on and off, I would say probably since the beginning. In the last 15 years, they've been pretty steadily competing on the regional level, and then in 2007, they had their first bid at nationals, and they've gone back to nationals all but 1 year since. In the competition itself, they put out a set of rules every year around August, September, right at the beginning of the school year, and the teams all have to read the rules and find out what's changed and change the constituent parts that they put in the concrete to make it light so that it will float, the shape of the canoe, the types of races they run. They do race these canoes, so they're not just for show. They have to hold 4 people on a all-out race that's, I'm going to say, somewhere around 500 yards. It has to hold up under a lot of load, a lot of stress, and it has to look good. And every year we try to have some type of a theme, often that's rooted in the community. This year their theme is the Army Corps of Engineers. I think the idea behind that this year was they wanted to honor the military, because there are a lot of students here that are either actively in the military or were in the military. military. So they're trying to honor those students and military personnel in general. And then that tie to engineering, because it's an engineering feat to make this canoe. So it's the Army Corps of Engineers combined into a canoe, and I don't exactly know what the graphics they'll put on the canoe to demonstrate that, but it's always kind of a surprise. They don't always let me know everything that's going on, which is probably good. And then I get a surprise too at the end when I see the finished product and the artistic vision that they had from the beginning that is realized at the end after, I don't know, 9 months of work.
It was a little sketchy, you know, you're looking at the water like, there's 3 inches until the water's coming overboard. Is this thing actually gonna, you know, keep us up the entire time? But, you know, you trust the older members, you've seen the videos, you know that it does float, and you just trust that and have at it when you're paddling. Have fun. Family's definitely very proud of me. They came to watch me at the last regionals. Last year at nationals, we placed 9th. That's our goal, is to beat 9th place. That's our personal best, and I would love to beat it.
We definitely want to crack the top 10 again. That's our #1 goal.
At least take the top 10 and give it our best shot as always.
Well, last year we hosted the regional conference, so that was just a local 5 schools that came to paddle and compete here, and we won. And that exceeded our expectations as far as support from the community and the number of spectators that came to support the event. And their interest for it was actually really high, which was surprising. And then we attended a national leadership conference in Rhode Island over last winter, and we got approached to think about hosting the national conference this year. And we submitted a package of what we had planned and what would happen at the university if we did host it. And the National ASCE committee really enjoyed it and came to check out our campus and decided that we would be the ones to host it. This year in June, there will be 23 schools here from across the country and maybe Canada and Puerto Rico. And they'll be here competing and displaying their canoes and then paddling as well.
I've been a paddler for 3 years, and you can only paddle for 3 years, you can only be registered. And so this year I'm the paddling captain. We have the paddlers get involved. We help them train for competition. Sitting down in the water, it's hard to get your bearings at first because it tips back and forth repeatedly. Balance is definitely key. The first time I sat down, I was so like, what do I do? I don't know what I'm doing. And then even holding a paddle, like holding it backwards, like you don't know what you're doing. But it definitely got a lot to get used to. I mean, like you can't just sit in the canoe and it's like, no, this is what I have to do, and this is what but definitely a lot of, learning. Last year in nationals, we came in 9th, which is the best that UPJ has done so far. And we were so proud of UPJ and just proud of our, facility here and our student group here. So we're just trying to, keep that alive and just do even better this year. I just love it. It's a good experience.
A little hesitant when you get in at first. You think it's going to sink, but it's just like riding a normal canoe. You sit and think about it for a while. Battleships and aircraft carriers are all made out of steel, which is much heavier than concrete, block for block. So it doesn't come as a huge surprise anymore, but it's still a really awesome concept because it's not a standard building material for a ship.
So I would say Pitt Johnstown is a pretty competitive team. They're a good group of kids. They build this canoe every year from scratch, from the ground up. They have to build a new mold, make new concrete, build a new canoe, cure it. It involves 3,000 to 4,000 man-hours of work. They don't get any college credit for it. It's all on their own time in the evenings and the weekends. We typically now have a team that is 30, 40, 50 students. Maybe 20 of them to 30 of them travel with the team when we compete. Well, Pitt Johnstown, we get to do what other people learn about. And, that's a great tag, I think, for this group. They do a lot of work. They do real engineering work here. They don't just learn formulas in books. They're doing down-in-the-dirt engineering to do this canoe. Does concrete float? It does on Kaleidoscope.
Kaleidoscope floats our boat.